This is Growth Guide, a podcast exploring the depths of curiosity, questioning everything in the name of growth. I'm your host, Brian D'Alessandro. Whether or not you've heard of the vagus nerve, prepare to have your mind blown. For such a big and important topic, I've brought in the incredible Dr. Eva Detko. Dr. Detko is a natural healthcare practitioner, author, and speaker, having studied natural medicine and the human mind for over 20 years. She has extensive experience in the fields of human physiology, biochemistry, nutritional sciences, and bioenergetics. Through her work, she successfully recovered from chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia and reversed Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I was drawn to her direct and accessible approach to healing and her strong focus on the vagus nerve as a pathway. The vagus nerve and the polyvagal theory codifies the inner workings of the body's stress response system. The vagus nerve is involved in handling anxiety and fear responses. It prevents inflammation, aids breathing, but wait, there's more. It also controls your heart rate and connects the gut brain and the brain. There's pretty much nothing that this thing doesn't get involved in. There's even a pretty new treatment of vagus nerve stimulation, which uses bioelectronics to treat a variety of conditions such as epileptic seizures and severe depression. Through understanding the vagal nerve, we're able to identify imbalances in our own body before they progress into a state of disease. And if we're already experiencing disease, we're given ways to treat at the root cause. So let's get into it. Dr. Eva Detko, thank you so much for joining today. It's an honor to have you here with us.
I'm so excited to be here with you and share whatever I can to just enhance people's lives and empower.
Yeah, and we're going to get into some really fun topics today. I know for myself, this was almost like this mystery topic when I first learned about it. I was training to become a yoga teacher, and we were doing a lot of work on the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And then this idea of the vagus nerve and polyvagal theory got brought up. And it just seemed like the curtain was lifted. This whole super highway that runs up and down our spinal column and governs so many of our major functions. Can you just kind of set this up for us and tell us about it? Give us kind of a little 101, because I know a lot of people have never heard of it, and it's such an empowering thing to really tap into.
Yes, of course. Yeah, so for people who are not familiar with the polyvagal theory by Dr. Stephen Porges, or how the vagus nerve affects our health and healing, our ability to heal, I'm going to give a bit of an overview, exactly as you said. So the vagus nerve is a big deal. It's our 10th cranial nerve, and it connects the brainstem to the rest of the body. And what's so unbelievable about this nerve is it's essentially it's two nerves, really. It's got two branches, but it's the longest nerve of the autonomic nervous system, and it has so many different functions. That's what's so incredible about it. And as I go on to describe it a little bit more, I hope that people will start realizing that if this one nerve innervates all of those different organs, then clearly, if that goes wrong, a lot of things will not work properly in the body, right? So basically, we often hear about the parasympathetic and sympathetic branches of the autonomic nervous system.
And can you just quickly say what they are, just for people who aren't familiar?
Sure. So parasympathetic is often described as the brakes of the autonomic nervous system, and sympathetic is the fight or flight, and that's the gas, right, pedal of the autonomic nervous system. So like I said, this vagus nerve connects the brainstem to pretty much most of sort of the organs in the chest and abdominal cavity. So we've got innervation to your lungs, your heart, your pancreas, your spleen, your gallbladder, your thymus, small intestine, 2/3 of the large intestine. All right, so there's liver, obviously. So there's a lot going on there. And so, like I said, so when you think about this nerve not working properly, you have a knock-on effect on all of those organs. But let's just explain the hierarchy, because this is really important about the hierarchy of the parasympathetic versus sympathetic. So that's the polyvagal theory. And so essentially, when we're talking about the vagus nerve and stimulating our vagus nerve, because we're going to be referring to stimulating our vagus nerve, we're really talking about the ventral branch of the vagus nerve. I mentioned there are two branches, and that's the rest, digest, detoxify, and heal part of the autonomic nervous system. Then, of course, we've got, as we said, the sympathetic, which is fight or flight. But we also have another response, which is the freeze or shutdown response. And that's actually the other branch of this vagus nerve. And that is the sort of called the dorsal vagus complex. And it's the old vagus, we could say. And then the new vagus is the rest, digest, detoxify, and heal, like I said. And that is also called a social engagement system, now a kind of social nervous system. And why that is referred to in this way is because when we're looking at the hierarchy of sort of what goes on when we interact with the world, when we are in this state of relaxation, when we feel completely safe and completely relaxed, because that I'm going to make this point a little bit later, but you cannot be a little bit safe or a little bit relaxed. This is like on and off switch. Okay. This is not that it's a bit of this and a bit of that. No, this is either one or the other.
Such an important distinction.
Yeah, it's key. It's critical because people feel like, oh, I'm not that stressed out. I suppose I'm kind of relaxed. Like, no, you cannot be kind of relaxed. It's really important to basically make people realize that this is not a dimmer switch. It's an on and off switch. So you either in rest and digest, or you in fight or flight, or you in freeze. You cannot be in all of those or in a combination at any one time. It's one or the other. Now, why is this important? Because the way it works is like this. If you sort of go about your life and you're nice and relaxed, which quite honestly, what you said is something also very, very important, that a lot of people think they're relaxed because they desensitize to how emotionally toxic and chronically stressed they are. And I want to touch on that a bit later on. But basically, when you go about your life and everything is peachy and really wonderful and you feel safe and relaxed, then that is when your ventral vagus complex, the rest, digest, detoxify, heal part of your autonomic nervous system is engaged. Okay. And then in that state, as the name indicates, we can digest food properly, we detoxify properly. All of those really key processes, including cellular regeneration and repair, healing overall, can only take place when your rest, digest, detoxify, heal response, so that ventral vagus is activated. Only in that state can we heal. And so, of course, that's going to be then relevant when we're talking to people spending most of their days, most of their waking hours in fight or flight or freeze.
It's while sipping on the 32-ounce coffee with 4 shots of espresso. And this is a big one that comes up for, entrepreneurs or anyone who's really working in today's society. We are so programmed to just grind and push through it. And sometimes we have to do the very counterintuitive thing of getting our bodies to come back down to that rest state. And we're then so much more productive. We free up our capacity for creative thinking and productivity. So I think it's such an important area. Yeah.
But just back for a moment to this hierarchy. So let's say you're out for a walk in nature and you feel connected, you feel grounded, you feel really good. It just feels, you get that feeling of, this is nice. Yeah. And that's great. Then obviously the vagus nerve is engaged, the ventral vagus is engaged, and your body is working optimally. Great. But then let's say something comes at you and there is something like maybe another person or an animal coming towards you. Your social engagement system will help you identify whether this is indeed a threat or not. And if it turns out that maybe it's an angry dog coming towards you or something like that, then the next thing that's going to happen, if this is indeed identified by your brain as a threat, and you're gonna have you kind of then switch to your sympathetic activation, and that's going to be fight or flight. So you may end up fighting this dog or running away from this dog. These are the two options that you have.
And this is completely subjective too, right? Our past experiences or even traumas inform if we perceive something as a threat.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm a bit of a dog whisperer. So I'll probably calm down. I'll get like into eye contact with the dog and I'll level with it. And to me, I'm not going to see it as a threat, right? However, I'm just saying exactly. It's absolutely internally determined what sort of response you're going to generate. But let's say that you're going to say, uh-oh, this is not good. It's a threat. Then you've got those two options, fight or flight. Now, if you manage to run away, then great. You then going to go home, have a nice cup of tea and forget all about it, and life goes on. If you decide to fight the dog and, it just so happens that you're successful, same, right? However, in case you're not successful running away or fighting this threat, whatever this may be, then your next activation after that is basically shutdown. And when you think about nature documentaries, right, when you have gazelle sort of running away from the lion, and at some point, if it knows that it cannot outrun that lion, then it's going to drop to the floor and it's going to shut down, and then all sorts of hormones will flood into the system to make this potential, death experience less painful. So that's kind of what we have also. We have this kind of shutdown freeze mode as well. Now, that's not conducive to healing either. And what you actually find with chronic illness, which is what I deal with a lot, is that a lot of people are in fight or flight. But when you have illnesses such as chronic fatigue, chronic Lyme, fibromyalgia, those sort of things, you actually find that those people often identify more with being in and out of freeze rather than fight or flight. So when we're talking about freeze, we're talking about this hypometabolic state, where it's like complete conservation of energy. It's basically hypometabolic, right? So it's like very little metabolically going on. That's why we call it shutdown. And it feels like shutdown. It feels like, okay, I can't do anything. My body's just like completely non-responsive. It's shut down, right?
Is this what happens when when someone blacks out from not from like the trauma of getting hit, but from the pain or the shock of something?
Exactly. It's also there's lots of like different examples of that. That's one of it. So like obviously I mentioned chronic illness, but say somebody freezes on giving a presentation and they can't get the words out. That's an example of a freeze response. Say a woman is giving birth in the hospital and she's like connected to all these machines and everything's beeping around her. Essentially, that's not a safe space. But she can't fight the doctor and she can't run away from it, so therefore she will more likely be in the freeze response, or basically like that complete blackout type thing. So there you go. So that is, it's there for a reason, clearly, and yes, at times this may be useful. But the problem we're having with society at large, particularly Western world I'm talking about, is that a lot of time, or a lot of the time people spend in those basically, either fight or flight or this hypometabolic state of freeze, and that means they cannot digest food properly. Inflammation is through the roof, because one of the key functions of the vagus nerve, apart from it innervates all of those organs, as we said, but one of the key like forefront jobs that it has to do is to put brakes on inflammation. So any chronic inflammatory states that people may struggle with, again, that indicates straight away that the ventral vagus is not online, it's not working properly, and we really need to rebalance this whole system, because essentially what you get if you always run around and have a ton of coffee and all this activation through stress, through all the different stimulants that people consume, what you're going to put your body in is that fight or flight constantly, and near enough constantly. Some people do that, but because they kind of used to this heightened hormonal state, it kind of feels like it's normal to them, but trust me, from the body's point of view, it's not normal, and the body can only compensate for so long, right?
Yeah, we're so adaptive, and we can be enduring something pretty you know, pretty horrible on the body and just accept it as normal, and it gets desensitized. So that's where I think this is really important information for people to digest and to think about how they can change things in their lives.
Yeah, and because the point is that even if somebody gets away with it for a period of time, they're not going to get away with it indefinitely. This dysregulation within the nervous system that we're talking about will eventually catch up with you, because the body has thousands upon thousands of compensatory mechanisms, but there will come a moment where it cannot compensate anymore. Okay, it's spent, it just cannot compensate anymore. And usually how this works is that for years, sometimes decades, people can just go on in the way that we're describing, where just constantly stimulating themselves to get through the day and to, in this high performing state. And then something happens. Maybe a relative dies, or they get a viral infection, or there is a exposure to toxin of some kind, because all of that is a stress to the system.
Yeah, or a global pandemic.
Exactly, right. And so that comes along, and bang, it's that one final thing that's going to tip them over the edge, right? And then past that, the system is basically in this either, sometimes complete shutdown before they can even lift themselves up a little bit.
Yeah, and we've spoken about this a little bit in the past when we were talking about CBD, the endocannabinoid system, and the main design of the human body is to come back to homeostasis, to find that balancing point. Same way between the parasympathetic and sympathetic state. Not one is good or bad; they both have a function, but we want to come back to that resting state because that's optimal, where that promotes longevity and creativity and all of these functions that we associate with health, happiness, and a long life. So these are really, really big topics.
It is, and it's particularly because we actually meant to be in this ventral vagus response, the rest and digest, most of our time. And in reality, it's the other way around, because most people spend most of their time in either fight or flight or freeze. So that's the issue.
Can you give us some signals there? Because I think, as you pointed to before, it's very easy for us to think that we're in a rest and digest state, and that anxiety and stress and being overworked aren't at play. What are some of those factors we could look out for to see when we actually are in that place?
Like I said, if you feel this complete kind of that kind of feeling of, oh, this is nice, whatever gives you that feeling puts you in that state of this ventral vagus state. However, there are obviously loads of symptoms, loads of things that you could look out for with regards, what is putting you in fight or flight or freeze. On the physiological level, any inflammatory type issues that remain unresolved, in particular, because obviously there are loads of different things that we can do to fight inflammation, clean diet being one of them and all that. But I know a lot of people who have been chasing that for a long, long time, and they're still not where they need to be. So when you have any sort of inflammatory issues, any inflammatory problems, that's going to indicate that there's a problem that needs addressing. Any sort of autoimmune conditions, anything like that, because that's obviously inflammatory disease. In fact, most chronic illness is inflammatory in nature, including heart disease, cancer, and all of that. Any kind of issues around blood pressure or heart rate, so any kind of dysregulation around that, indicates that there is an issue with this part of the autonomic nervous system, or rather the balance between the branches. And also any issues with glucose homeostasis. So people with poor vagal tone, as we say. Well, that's what we call it. If that part of the nervous system not working properly, then we say somebody's got poor vagal tone. And if somebody's got issues with glucose homeostasis, like those spikes up, down, getting hypoglycemic, needing to stimulate themselves with sugar, that's definitely linked to the vagus nerve.
And I think that's a really good one, like, because in this world of people that are just pushing so hard and taking this warrior mindset, it's so easy to just discredit the other stuff, to not be going to the doctor and getting the actual signs. What are some of those more subtle ones? Like, okay, I find myself, craving sugar because I'm getting these spikes and crashes, or I feel the need to have that first cup of coffee before I do anything in the morning. What are some of those other little, kind of notes you could look for?
Yeah, that's a big one. If somebody needs caffeine to get them going in the morning, that's not normal. Just so you know, that's not normal. Having those crashes and needing to have that sugary boost, that's not normal. It's not just how you are. No, it's not. It's your body trying to compensate again. Another really anything to do with digestion, anything to do with digestion. Great number of SIBO cases, for starters, about 70-80% of SIBO is actually due to poor vagal tone, but also other things like, anything like, bloating, just dysbiosis, when there's just constant issues around IBS, those sort of things, anything to do with poor bowel function. And that will be definitely related to the vagus nerve, and those issues greatly benefit from people addressing the vagus nerve usually. But even things like problems with swallowing, a lot of people have that thing of not being able to swallow supplements. And that actually is a classic signal that your vagus nerve is not working properly. If you can't swallow a supplement because you feel that you're going to choke, that's a classic. And anything to do with, like, if somebody, and I've had clients like this, when they want to project their voice and the voice does not really project in the way that they intended, and it kind of like dies down, or there's issues with voice modulation, and that's also going to be vagus nerve related. So just like little symptoms like that to look out for. And just issues with things like brain fog, memory problems, chronic pain are also related to the vagus nerve. But that's on the physiological level. I also really want to point out that if anybody has symptoms of what I call emotional toxicity, such as poor self-worth, like beating yourself up, being like excessively self-critical, always having this negative self-talk, chronic anxieties, chronic fears, chronic guilt, chronic shame, over-analyzing, overthinking, feeling overwhelmed, all of those are actually symptoms of somebody being emotionally toxic. And being emotionally toxic is background stress. And that background stress puts you in fight or flight or freeze. So there's a connection there, because a lot of people right now have chronic anxieties. And again, people think that's normal. I've always been like that. No, it's not normal. There's a root cause to this. And if you desensitize to it and just kind of manage it, but don't really get to the root cause and deal with it properly, then you always stimulating fight or flight or even freeze in some cases. So, but it becomes so background, all of those emotional conflicts when people have this internal battle inside their heads, where it's like, nah, 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 like trying to, like, almost like having an internal fight inside their head, all of that sort of thing. That's toxic, that's stress, that's stress. And any form of stress, whether it is chemical, biological, mechanical, or emotional, makes the nervous system react in exact same way. So whether it's toxins from food, or whether it is EMFs, or whether it is something like feeling really crap about yourself, it's going to essentially, from the nervous system point of view, the reaction is going to be the same, and it's going to be fight or flight activation in the first instance. So this is what I want to really stress, because and people kind of get this, the healthy eating and how that affect, like more and more people are on board with this fact that if you put crap into your body, it's going to have an effect on the body, right? Biochemically speaking. But you are, as much as you are what you eat or what you digest and absorb, shall we say, you are also what you think and what goes on inside your psyche. You are also that. And so I want to really emphasize how big a factor this is in this whole nervous system dysregulation, which basically over time 100% leads to disease. This nervous system dysregulation that we're talking about sooner or later leads to disease.
Give us that stat one more time for people who have trouble remembering numbers. What percent?
Oh yeah, no. If you have nervous system dysregulation, sooner or later, this is gonna lead to disease. This is pretty much a given. But I'm telling you, because I've done this for 23 years, working with people who already have crossed that line and now have a chronic illness situation, and they're trying to get themselves out of it. And this nervous system dysregulation that we're talking about here is the ultimate root cause of a lot of this problem. So yes, of course, there's also the energetic side of it and biofield imbalances and all of that. But from the physiological perspective, the nervous system dysregulation is the reason why somebody's gut is not working and the microbiome is dysregulated. It's the reason why your immune system is not working and why that's dysregulated. And then a virus comes along and your body can't defend itself against the virus. The virus, it's a virus. I mean, come on. We're surrounded with this stuff all the time. It's not really anything that spectacular. It's just another virus, right? I'm talking about COVID-1984. So basically, what I'm saying is, if you have the level of resilience, like when talking neurological resilience and emotional resilience, I also talk about energetic resilience. But when you collectively, if you're resilient, and which means your nervous system is balanced and everything's activating and working when it should and how it should, when you have that, when a stressor, an external stressor comes along, it does not knock you off your feet. It does not destroy your life. You just basically like kind of going, okay, right? And then you're finding your feet and then you continue as normal as before. But obviously, with the amount of fear propaganda, that's basically where a lot of people unfortunately got knocked off their feet because they were not that resilient in the first place. And fear, one of the lowest vibrating emotions, by the way, the fear is actually destructive to the nervous system and the immune system. There are actually studies that show that people were coming from a poor state of resilience, and then on top of that, they were plunged into a massive amount of fear through all the fear propaganda. Because I'm sorry, it is just fear propaganda. I'm just going to say it because authentically, that's how I feel. I'm not going to pretend it's anything else. It's fear propaganda.
You spoke about referencing you are what you eat, and I just want to extend what we eat not just to the physical but also to the information we take in, and as you were saying, the relationships. But we're consuming so much content these days. First of all, we're over consuming. So if you're eating way too much food, well, you're going to get obese, and a lot of the same thing happens when you're over consuming content. The other thing is, if you're consuming too much, you're not able to digest it properly and integrate it into your body, or in this case, your life. And so when you're taking on information from everywhere, the news cycles become shorter. You get on this loop of needing more and more and more. And as you said, when fear is the leading currency by the media outlets these days, it gets you on this loop where you are kept at a subpar level and your health is directly affected 100%.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And you drawing this really great analogy between the food we consume and content we consume. And in the same way, it's the same when it then comes to People want to take steps to do something about it, and they say, right, I'm going to detox, right? I'm going to detox. I always draw the same parallels with detox. So okay, great. You're going to eat cleaner, maybe you're going to do some intermittent fasting, whatever you're going to do. But actually, if you don't detox emotionally, you're not really kind of you're going to miss the mark. Basically, you're going to miss the mark. So there is parallels with that as well.
Yeah, I love that. And on top of it, it's being discerning with where you're eating or getting your content. I mean, if you're choosing to go to the buffet, we live in a buffet world, and content is coming at us buffet style. If you're just going to go for more quantity over the quality, well, you're going to suffer. So that's the other way we could look at it. We have all of these technologies and tools to curate and say, you know what? Let's go for the fine dining experience, right? Let's go for the Zagat's guide to content. So be discerning about where you're taking on your content, how much, and the same goes for your food. It's pretty simple when you think about it that way, but the addictive attributes that both food and information can have as they stimulate different responses in the body, it's very toxic. Can you talk a little bit about the stimulation we're getting when we are experiencing different types of information or relationships?
Oh, absolutely. The toxic information, which, absolutely, it's critical. As you said, discernment is so important these days. And toxic relationships, I'm glad you mentioned this one. That's part of, if you want to clean things up and make sure that your nervous system works as it should, 100%, both of those things are very important to address. Because really we are as social creatures, we really, this crosses more into the energetic side of things. But if you have people who surround you who are very negative and very fearful, very fear-based, and their behavior is very fear-based as well, if you engage with that, you will be affected by it. Okay, you will be affected by it, or you at the very least will be drained by it. Even if you may be one of those people who are like, I'm gonna just like keep everybody's energy up, and they're like dragging you down. It's like, well, you know what? Don't do it. You need to learn to set really strong boundaries, which kind of brings me to the point of stressing that if somebody asks, okay, so how do I regulate my nervous system? How do I bring it all into balance? And this actually, what we just mentioned right now is a critical point to take note of for anybody who wants to bring their nervous system into a state of balance, because it's very much about what you don't do, not just about what you do. There are loads of vagus nerve stimulating techniques and loads of great stuff that you find if you look that up. Vagus nerve stimulation, all sorts of things will come up, and these are all great. But first of all, it's just about what you do not do as it is about what you do. Okay. And throwing your TV out the window and actually just switching off from all this garbage that is being blurred out, particularly mainstream and social media, that's quite critical. And then obviously setting really good boundaries in your relationship. So if somebody is like super negative, they just want to talk about fake stats, because we know now that most of the stats that they've been feeding us are fake. If somebody just wants to kind of just talk about that and engage with that, like, why do you need to do that? Why is this important that you go over information like that? Something you can do about it anyway, even if it was real, and it's not even real. But even if it was, you couldn't do anything about it. Why drive yourself nuts over it? So, and there could be other people just being in this fear consciousness where all they want to do is talk about stuff that is scary and just introduces even more fear. Now, if you have people like that around you, okay, you're never going to have great optimal health, and you're never going to be have like boundless energy because that just sucks the life out of you. So it's very, very important to just say, you know what, I'm going to draw the line here. I love you, whoever you are, but we're not going to talk about that. Okay, so that's not boundary number one. With some people, you may actually just say, you know what, I don't really want to talk to you because all you ever talk about is this and I don't want to talk about it. So it just depends where you are. Sometimes with family and friends, people are not so great with setting boundaries because people have all sorts of hangups and insecurities, and a lot of people just want approval and acceptance, and they don't want to feel like, oh, if I'm going to put my foot down, they're not going to like me anymore. And there's all of that going on, which goes to dealing with your own trauma and your own negative beliefs. But on the basic level, just start paying attention to people around you and what sort of energy and what sort of messages they're putting out there, what sort of things that they drag you into in terms of conversations. And you either shift those conversations or you say, you know what, I don't want to talk about it, right?
Absolutely. I think the same way I was saying before, the different, forms of information usually have a different currency. So do we. We all are operating, and they change at times, but there are some people that are operating on this currency of fear, or I've heard it referred to as a wounded energy. And it's very easy when somebody's in that mode for it to pull yours out, and it drops everyone down. And so I think what you're saying is spot on, that we have to be discerning with where we invest our time with people and how we show up ourselves. And it's not about being fake and positive to a fake degree and not feeling your feelings, but it's how you digest and process those feelings. Are you going to project them onto the world around you and try to bring everybody else to where you are? Or are you going to move through it in a healthy and responsible way and then come back, into an environment that is conducive to being at your best?
Essentially, it's all a choice. And I love it that you actually said that you don't suppress and repress your feelings. That's a terrible, terrible idea. We do not do that. We do not encourage that. Essentially, emotions are just energy in motion. They do not stick around. They only stick around if you create a narrative or you create attachment. They usually, otherwise they don't stick around. Okay, so you can very easily say, you know what, looking at the world right now and what's going on, I feel really sad. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you feeling sad about what you're seeing. But rather than just latch onto this, create a narrative about it and just like hold on to it, like it's like, you're floating down the river and you're like grabbing a rock. It's like no, don't hold on to that. Just let go, let it be, let it work through you. And then and that is basically what you're talking about in terms of like deal with this in a constructive way. But essentially it's about choice. You can choose to stay in that fear consciousness, or you can choose to feel fear because something's coming at you, and then a natural response of your nervous system and the brain, we evolved with this response, and it's going to be okay, right? But then it then having enough awareness to go like, you know what, I'm going to step out of it now, all right, and I'm not going to just perpetuate it and drag other people into it. I'm just not going to do it. So a lot of it is choice. A lot of it is choice. And if you are not unable, if you kind of listening to me and going, no, it's not choice because I can't help it, then that means you need to look at your traumas. That means you need to look at your negative beliefs and whatever you've got going on at this subconscious level that is enabling you to make the choice of saying, you know what, I'm not going to engage with this narrative. I'm just going to step away from it. Yes, it's making me angry. Yes, it's making me fearful. Yes, it's making me sad. I felt it deeply, and now I can just let it go, and I choose to step out of it and let it go. So a lot of people unfortunately have unresolved traumas and all sorts of other stuff. And so it's not going to be that easy for them to just go like on a roller coaster, just let go, right? So it's easier said than done. But if you deal with the underlying issues, then you will be able to do that. And it really becomes a beautiful gift, because you just go in, you know what? Yeah, no, I'm hearing all that, but I'm just, I'm not going to engage with it, and it becomes a choice, right? So that's going to have a positive effect on your nervous system, because if you're constantly being dragged into those states of, in particular, anger, fear, and grief, then then that's going to further put your nervous system out of balance. And so yes, we do have those great techniques to stimulate the vagus nerve: deep breathing, sound of any kind. So whether you're singing, whether you're listening, whether you're doing sound healing, sound is great. For some people, meditation, not for everybody, meditation at this time, because some people are just too much in the like freeze and fight or flight, and they'll try and do meditation and they're gonna feel even more agitated. But for those who obviously feel relaxed by meditation, that's obviously going to be a great tool. Spending time in nature, all of those sort of hormetic type methods like exercise, cold exposure, heat exposure, that's obviously going to contribute to a better balance of the nervous system. Things like gratitude journaling. There's science to show that gratitude journaling works really well for the vagus nerve. Anything that makes you feel peaceful in here will have a positive effect on your vagus nerve. But like I said, you don't think about it necessarily as trying to biohack your nervous system. I don't believe you can biohack this. You need to do the work. If there's unresolved trauma, you need to work on that. If there's unresolved limiting beliefs or some sort of patterns, behavioral patterns, adaptations, all sorts of things like that, maybe obviously attachment trauma, a lot of people obviously have those attachment adaptations. And then we need to look at it more, comprehensively, and then not engage with the negative garbage. So when you're thinking about, if you want to plant something in your garden, you don't just throw seeds on a lot of weeds. You want to take the weeds out. And that's basically what I'm talking about. Take the garbage out of your mind, and also don't put more garbage in. And that would be things like listening to the news or engaging in pointless conversations on social media, and a lot of divide, a lot of arguments, a lot of fighting. Yeah, if you're going to engage with that, your nervous system is not going to be in a good shape. So, and then, when we remove the garbage and we stop putting it in, then we can start those new seeds. They've got a chance to actually do something, and then we can nurture that. And that's really how you arrive at a more balanced nervous system. So anything that can calm your mind down obviously will have that effect. But really, I would like for people to think about it in a more comprehensive way, from the point of view of fixing this nervous system dysregulation. If I work with somebody, we'll be doing that. We'll be building self-awareness. You need to understand how your psyche works. You need to understand what is sort of blocking you from achieving what you want. There may be some secondary gain, particularly when people have chronic health issues. There's definitely always that. We need to stabilize the nervous system. Also, obviously, we will be using some of those techniques like deep breathing or whatever to actually stimulate the vagus nerve to work better. But we also need to make sure that the mind and body are connected, that people understand their emotional triggers, that they can actually deal with emotions, they can understand them, they recognize core emotions, they recognize complex emotions, they have tools to discharge emotions from the system. Also, I mentioned dealing with trauma, including attachment trauma, including intergenerational ancestral trauma. So, it's a collective thing. There could be loads of things going on there for somebody that got them to this point and giving them this behavioral patterns that they currently have, right? And also we need to be looking at repairing our core identity. A lot of people with eroded identity, feeling really crap about themselves, not feeling good enough, not feeling deserving. This is erosion of identity. And then we need to address any value conflicts, redesign the belief system. We need to be looking into forgiving ourselves and forgiving others, and dealing with toxic relationships. And then on top of that, we didn't talk here about biofield imbalances.
Yeah, do you want to go into that?
So I would just briefly say that this is not some sort of woohoo kind of thing that is like esoteric and there's nothing to it. No, I mean it's science really. We do actually have an energetic field around our body. We have an electromagnetic field, like for instance, the electromagnetic field that we have around the heart is 100 times what we've got around our brain. So this heart space it becomes very, very important when we deal with any sort of energetic disturbances that, operating from the heart space, and making sure that we kind of have this space balance. So that obviously feeds into this whole nervous system story that we talking about here, because the other layers that we have will eventually feed into physical body. But what happens is that their physical body is the last one to break down, because of, like we said, the body just compensates and compensates and compensates, and at some point it stops compensating because it just doesn't have any resources left to do that anymore.
So this is also a part of our bigger systemic issue that I think we're facing as a society. We're so focused on this imbalance of and obsession with the physical and the mental, right? The tangible and the stuff we can control. It's that masculine that's out of harmony, that's out of its sacred state. And because of it, we then lose touch with valuing those softer, the emotional or the energetic states. And when we're in such a dense state in the physical and mental, it's very easy to just brush off the more subtle states and to not be able to connect with them. I think that's why you mentioned before, some people can't really get the same benefits from meditation because they're so far from it, they can't tap into those subtle states. But when we do, we start to see how much they are precursors to the mental and the physical. And that's, I believe, why you said the journaling for gratitude is so powerful and can be measured, because that's activating the heart. And when the heart is filled and it's emanating, well, that has profound positive effects on the rest of our body and our innate healing capability.
Yeah, absolutely. When people are living in those, just in those lower chakras, and they're obviously out of balance, and that they obviously, somebody who's very fear based
Mm-hmm.
will obviously have an imbalance there, and it's almost like they're blocked from those higher energy centers that we have, that essentially, if we're blocked from that, if the flow of energy is blocked in through the heart, but also obviously higher up as well, then somebody could be just going through the motions of meditation and it's like, well, that's not doing anything for me, exactly like you said.
Yeah, and this is something where, I want to just say to anyone out there who has a visceral response to just brush this off, if you're actually still listening, but to brush this off, to label it as woo woo or anything that we tend to do because of this programming we have. I challenge you to have an open mind. If you look at the field of quantum physics, if you told someone 20 years ago that you can have something that can exist in two places at once on opposite sides of the universe, and they're directly affecting each other, or a particle could be a wave and a or it could be a wave and a particle at the same time, like, we would have said that's impossible. But we now know that to be true. And so when we compare that to what we're talking about with energetics, which is really just electricity, um, it doesn't seem like a far fetch at all. So, open your mind, try some of these things out and see if there's something that might actually speak to you.
Oh, there's actually a ton of really good science that's looking into the subtle energy bodies and also the energy centers, the chakras and the chakra system. There's the science there, it's just dismissing it. Exactly, it's just this programming. It's programming. It's just that kind of left brain dominance that unfortunately is at the moment landing a lot of people into an awful lot of trouble,
Mm-hmm.
because just being that left brain dominant, these are going to be the people who will experience the most fear, the most stress, and we're going to come out the worst out of this whole pandemic situation.
Absolutely. Eva, is there anything else you wanted to touch on?
Well, I think we covered quite a lot. I do hope that people engage with this and at least sort of looking maybe a little bit deeper. If this is something that you maybe not ready for right now, then at least kind of keep it at the back of your mind. But really, I just wanted to stress that if you feed that nervous system imbalance that most people have, particularly because of chaos 2020 and what's continuing into this year as well. Most people are in the state of imbalance. And if you continue in that state of imbalance without doing anything about it, even though you may not have chronic illness right now, you basically having your resilience shrinking more and more and more if you're not actually addressing this right now. So my wish for everybody is not like, don't wait till you fall off the cliff, do some work around this now to at least keep yourself, at a reasonable level with this. Even if you don't want to go deeper, just use some of those tools that can help with that balance, because that balance will sooner or later lead to disease. That's a guarantee, basically, because of all the connections that we talked about.
Dr. Eva Detko, thank you so much for joining today. This was a fascinating discussion and really empowering because you gave some great tips on how we can put things into action to change our lives for the better. So thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me this platform, Brian. I am very passionate about this message. Really, really important, particularly right now. So thanks again for having me.
Thanks for joining us this week on Growth Guide. A big thanks to our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by Project New You. I'm a huge fan of their Nitrovite nootropic brain supplement. It's helped me to develop laser focus, a better memory recall, and motivation. Nitrovite has helped me in launching this podcast amongst completing many other projects. Visit growthguide.love/focus to learn more and use promo code GROWTH for 15% off. This episode is also sponsored by the upcoming film Thrive 2. This is what it takes. A follow-up to the 2011 hit Thrive, which is one of the most widely viewed documentaries in history with over 90 million views. If creating a better world matters to you, don't miss it. Visit growthguide.love/thrive. Make sure to visit our website, growthguide.love, where you can find freebies, exclusive content, and subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. If you found value in listening, I'd really appreciate a rating on iTunes. I can't tell you just how important this is. Or spread the love. Tell your friends, your fam, heck, tell your spirit animals. And follow me on Instagram at growthguide.love. Be sure to tune in next week for our newest episode.